This devotional is for Monday, May the 22nd, 2023. It is from the book of Deuteronomy, the last chapter, chapter 34. And there's also the additional reading for today, Psalm 91. This devotional, however, will focus on Deuteronomy 34 solely. Now, the title of the devotional is Moses' Death, Obituary, and Memorial. Well, we come to the end of the Pentateuch being the first 5 books of the Old Testament believed to have been penned by Moses. Now, let's take our Bible. Look with me at Deuteronomy chapter 34. Now, in the first 4 verses, we're going to see where Moses is given a view of the promised land. Now, to introduce this chapter, I want to remind you of a verse from Psalm 116 where the psalmist writes, "Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints." Indeed, the death of Moses would be numbered among the most splendid of believers. Now, Moses, having finished his parting blessing to the congregation of Israel, where we read in chapter 34 and verse 1 that Moses went up from the plains of Moab unto the mountain of Nebo. Now, from Pisgah, one of the peaks of Mount Nebo, the Lord showed Moses all the land of Gilead unto Dan. Now, Gilead being the land on the east side of the Jordan River, which Moses had promised the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh would inherit that part of the land as their inheritance and per their request. Then, also noticing verses 2 through 4, again, Moses standing on the peak of Pisgah, Moses beheld all the land the Lord had promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as their inheritance. Now, this is the land on the west side of the Jordan River. Now, there was the land of the Naphtali in the north, the land of Ephraim and Manasseh in the central region of Canaan. To the west, all the land of Judah, to the sea, the Mediterranean Sea, and then to the south of the Jordan Valley that reached the plain and valley of Jericho, which was known then as the city of palms, unto Zoar. Well, this region laid near to Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, how might Moses, we ask, have scanned so grand a vista from Mount Nebo? The Lord reveals that miracle in chapter 34 and verse 4, where we read, "I have caused thee," that is Moses, "to see it, to see the land with thine eyes." Additionally, the Lord had preserved Moses' eyesight. For we read in verse 7 that though he was 127 or 120 years old rather, his eye was not dim. That is, he had not grown blind. And then notice verses 5 through 7, Moses' death and burial. We read in verse 5, "Moses the servant of the Lord died there in the land of Moab." Now, I invite you to consider then, in our previous devotional in Deuteronomy 33, verse 1, we had read Moses given the title, the honor, the man of God. Now, in verse 5, you'll notice that he is lovingly remembered now, this giant of the faith, as the servant of the Lord. And so, as you look at verse 5, then, we find that Moses has died. But you'll notice in verse 5, not because he was old, frail, or suffering failing health. Instead, he died in the land of Moab according to the word of the Lord. He was 120 years old when he died, yet his eye was not dim, nor his natural force abated. In other words, age had not weakened this great leader, this great man of God. But Moses was dead, according to, as you look at verse 5, the word, and that is the will of the Lord. Well, the Lord had permitted Moses then to see the land, and still he was not allowed to go over thither, we read. And so it was with humility and meekness that the servant of the Lord accepted the consequences of his failure to obey the Lord. He died. And we read in verse 6, that the Lord buried him in a valley in the land of Moab, over against Beth Peor, but no man knoweth of his sepulchre, even unto this day, and even unto this day. Then notice as we return now from the mountain where Moses has died, verses 8 through 9, and now we look upon Moses' successor in verses 8 through 9. Now we read in verse 8 that Israel mourned the death of Moses for 30 days. And when the days of mourning were past, verse 9, Joshua, full of the spirit of wisdom, became the man whom the children of Israel hearkened. Well, as we conclude our study of Deuteronomy, we're reminded as we look at verses 10 through 12 of Moses' character. Now, there was no man like Moses, we read, whom the Lord knew face to face. And so Joshua, you understand, did not fulfill the likeness of his predecessor. He didn't fill his shoes, so to speak. But he was God's man for the hour, and one God had chosen to lead Israel and claim the promised land. I invite you to go to my website, heartofashepherd.com, and there you will find 5 Bible study questions that I believe will help you as you study today's scripture reading. God bless you. Thank you for being a part of this Heart of a Shepherd. God bless you. Bye-bye.